Thank you very much, Mr Chair. As my learned colleague Claire Curran has pointed out, we've supported this bill. It's a very important part of returning the confidence of the New Zealand public back to our capital markets. Mr Chair, I would like to point out that even though we are talking about point one, part one of this bill, Simon Power brought this bill to the House. He's a very hard-working minister, is Simon Power. And I would just like to quote Simon Bridges on this when he said that Simon Power is actually a minister responsible for bringing over 40% of the bills to this House. And I don't think it's any coincidence, Mr Chair, that Simon Power has actually decided to resign from Parliament. I'm not too sure why such a hard-working minister, an enthusiastic minister, would decide to resign from Parliament when he's in this sort of his height, he's charging ahead. But I suspect that he's sick and tired of doing all the donkey work for all his colleagues. How many people are in Cabinet? I don't know, 12, 14, a lot of them. And if you've got one minister doing 40% of the work, the question has to be asked, what are the other ministers doing? It appears there's no plan for doing anything, Mr Chair. They're not doing anything at all. But back to the part one of this bill, Mr Chair. As I mentioned, the Auditor Regulation and External Reporting Bill is a bill that Labor supported because, as I've talked about in a number of speeches, on a number of bills actually, Mr Chair, it is absolutely important that the New Zealand public can have confidence in the people who are responsible for looking after and for regulating our financial and our capital markets. Because, Mr Chair, this did not happen, this has disappeared, and as a result, well, actually take a step back, we all know that about $6 billion has disappeared from the savings of hard-working Kiwis mainly, who invested in these firms and who were let down by people who professed a competency in the tasks required to manage a lot of these funds and a lot of these finance companies. And this is where Part 1 comes into it, Mr Chair, because Part 1 actually outlines the preliminary and the key provisions of this bill. And the main gist of this is it talks a lot about the fact that auditors and auditing firms must be registered. Because in the past, Mr Chair, a lot of the characters who profess competency in this area, who hawked their services, actually weren't registered, and as a result, there was false confidence built, which has actually been completely eroded. And I think if we go back actually to a provision that that Ms Curran was talking about, if you breach this, then you are liable to a fine. This is, sorry, Mr Chair, this is Clause 8. You're liable to a fine of up to $50,000. So I think the message that this will send out is that Parliament is actually very serious about what we are doing here, because it is simply not good enough. It is not good enough to betray the confidence of ordinary New Zealanders, of good hard-working New Zealanders, who trust the experts, who profess a competence, who put their name on a prospectus or any sort of offering, and then be absolutely let down to the tune of up to $6 billion. Now, Mr Chair, I do want to say that there are a lot of auditors out there who are incredibly competent, who are registered, who have always been registered, and who have done a fantastic job and who continue to do a good job. And in fact, this is the sort of bill, and Part 1 is the sort of part that they require, and they salute this. Because what it does is it gets all the cowboys out of the industry that gave the industry a bad name. And it's if we go through sort of part 1 clauses, well, it goes up to clause 9A, and it makes not only the person or the firm liable for prosecution if they're not registered, and they say they are, it makes the other partners of the firm liable. So what it actually does is it ensures that every partner in a firm, whether they do other tasks aside from auditing, must ensure that everyone who says they are an auditor is in fact registered, or in fact they could lose their licence or be liable to a fine not exceeding $50,000, which is, I think, in anyone's language, quite a lot of money. What this does do under Clause 5 is it sets out the Financial Market Authority's function, which again is quite important. I think a lot of us will have seen the news, will have seen the setup of the new Financial Markets Authority, will have seen the chair of this authority and the CEO interviewed, and probably a lot of people are wondering, what is this authority going to do? How can we be sure how can we be sure that this authority, Mr Chair?
Stuart Nash.
Thank you, Mr Chair. How can we be sure that this authority is actually going to restore the integrity of our financial and our capital markets back to a point where where investors actually have confidence to jump back in? Because if there's one thing that's for sure, Mr Chair, it is that we need New Zealanders to start investing in capital markets in our productive economy. No longer is it good enough to have investors simply putting their money in houses, simply putting their money in the unproductive side of our economy, because that is certainly not going to drive economic growth for this country. But the Financial Market Authority, Mr Chair, I think is a very good step forward. And if we have a look at the provisions of the functions of the Financial Market Authority under Clause 5, it says they are responsible to issue licences to oversee auditors and to authorise the registration of overseas audit firms. So not only does this apply to New Zealand firms, it applies to every single person and firm that wants to say that they are an auditor and operate in New Zealand, which is most important because, as I mentioned, one of the main tasks, Mr Chair, I think, of the Financial Markets Authority is in some way to restore a lot of that lost confidence. And I don't know, as mentioned, when I saw the interview of the Chair and the CEO of this new authority, those gentlemen stressed the absolute need that their first task was to restore the confidence in our financial markets. There is absolutely no doubt about that. They were very clear about their mandate, and I think anyone who is unclear of their mandate, all they have to do is look at clauses 5, or actually only clause 5, to see what this organisation has to do. It has to monitor the audit regulatory systems of accredited bodies, report on the adequacy and effectiveness of those systems, and take action in respect of those systems that are inadequate or ineffective. So not only is this a passive authority, Mr Chair, this is an active authority. They are responsible for looking and keeping an eye on everyone who's working under the guise of a registered auditor, and if they see action which is inappropriate or inadequate or ineffective, then they are responsible for jumping in there and ensuring that it is nipped in the bud. Because no longer can we have the sort of financial disasters that have afflicted New Zealanders over the last 3 or 4 years, and like I said, have resulted in the loss of about $6 billion. Far too much to take out of the savings of good, hard-working New Zealanders who thought their money was safe. The other thing, there are a couple of other things I must outline that the Financial Market Authority under Clause 5 has to do. They have to perform or exercise any other functions, powers or duties conferred or imposed on it by other parts. Now what I'm saying by this is it's quite a wide-ranging brief. Please don't be under any illusion, anyone, that this is an authority without teeth. This is an authority with a lot of teeth. This is an authority with a mandate to go hard, to go strong, to be seen to go strong, and to be seen to restoring the confidence in our system. They have to monitor, as mentioned, they've got to monitor the audit regulatory systems. So it's not simply a passive body that's going to sit back and do nothing. This is very much an authority that has a very strong mandate as given by this Parliament, and I think supported by all parties in this House. That's a little unusual, Mr Chair, but all parties agree that something needed to be done, and as a consequence of that, all parties have worked incredibly hard to ensure that what we have here is a piece of legislation we can all go out and be proud of and say to the public of New Zealand, we believe we have got it right, but as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and let's hope that the Financial Market Authority actually does what the law seeks to do. I think it probably will. If we look at the interpretation, an audit firm means a partnership or body corporate that carries on the business of providing auditing services, whether or not it provides other services. So if you're a general accounting company, then you also have to be audited. And I don't know if people remember the Enron debacle. That brought down one of the largest accounting and auditing companies in the world because there was a perception there, not a perception, the reality was there was not enough distance between those who were auditing and those who were giving advice. What this does is it ensures that everyone who says they are an auditor must be registered. Thank you very much, Mr Chair.
The Honourable Dr Wayne Mapp.